Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Allison K. Dagny. I have a question for you today, and that question is, where are you in your emotional abuse recovery journey? And I ask this question because I think it's really important that you know where you are. And most people typically have a general idea and can define that. But the problem is that most people don't know how to get to the next stage or to the next level of recovery, and most people end up stuck. And I've titled this episode today, Escaping the Swamp of Emotional Abuse Recovery, because this is something that resonated really deeply with me when I was going through the worst part of my emotional abuse recovery. And I called it the swamp. And the reason why I called it this was because I couldn't think of a better description of what it felt like to be completely just sad and hurt and fighting for my life, essentially, and my soul. And it felt like if you were abandoned in a swamp, dark, desolate, snakes, alligators, thunderstorms, lightning and rain, and really no help. And so, that's a pretty bad picture to be painting, but that's really what it felt like for me. And maybe you can relate to that. The only thing you want to do is get out of the swamp when you're in it. And the thing that I have to tell you is that a lot of times people will tell you, no one is coming, no one is coming. And in some ways that's true, but in other ways there are lots and lots of resources out there. There are a lot of tools and people who are willing to help. And oftentimes, if we don't raise our hand or reach out for that support, we will end up staying stuck. Now, I'm going to talk about this because I want you to understand why we might end up staying stuck in the swamp, not just from the point of we can't get out because of external circumstances, but why we might not get out of the swamp because of what's going on inside of us. And I think this is going to be really, really important. So let's just dive right into this. When I created this podcast, I dedicated it and designed it for people who were suffering and struggling just like I did. And I want this to be able to be a resource to help you get to the next stage, to get out of the swamp. If that looks like getting on dry land, right? If that looks like, okay, I'm in dry land, but there's still an occasional thunderstorm here and there. Or maybe it's, I'm at dry land, there's rainbows and sunshine, but now I want to get up to the top of the mountain and have these beautiful scenic views, right? If you're stuck in the swamp, it's hard to even think about what could be next, right? It's just like, get me out of here. So today we're going to go over some common emotional states of the swamp and different misconceptions about recovery, as well as how to shift out of the swamp. So if this resonates with you, or if you know someone who is in a deep, dark, desolate place like the swamp emotionally after narcissistic abuse, emotional abuse, or really, really difficult trauma, then send this episode to them and share it, because I think it could be really powerful when we understand why we are stuck and then the tools on how to get out. Now, before we dive into, all the things that I want to talk about, I really think it's important to address the importance of having, been through emotional abuse and then having to deal with the aftermath. Because most of the time, people who have experienced emotional abuse or narcissistic abuse, things like that, are in survival mode. And they are coping with whatever it is that they're dealing with in that moment. And often, once that relationship is over, or they're no longer being abused by that person, there still could be leftover abuse, like post-separation abuse and flying monkeys and smear campaigns. Obviously, those kinds of things will happen. But I'm talking about like when you're actually in the relationship with the person who's hurting you, whether that was a parent, whether it's a coworker, whether it's a partner, you have dissociated from that person, let's say, but then there's this big mountain to climb. This, like, oh my goodness, like, what do I have to do now? Because when you shift from being in a situation where you are just surviving, and then you get out of that situation of survival, then that's when all of these things start to pop up. All of these things that had been buried, all of these issues that you haven't dealt with are starting to come to the surface, and they will affect your relationships with people you love and care about. They can affect your ability to be able to get out of bed in the morning. It can affect your ability to be able to focus at your job. It can create so many problems if we don't address it. So if you are someone who has experienced emotional abuse, you're out of that relationship, and now you're experiencing the aftermath of that, this episode will help you to navigate through that. So let's talk about the swamp for a minute. And this analogy that I have come up with, and I actually wrote about this in my book because it was something that really resonated so deeply with me. You know, feelings that people go through and thoughts that, survivors have when they're in this phase, right? Like after the abuse, you're just like, I don't know how to live. I don't know who I am. No one understands me. You may feel like you've lost yourself or you don't know who you are. Maybe you're having difficulties in your relationships because of behaviors that you used to survive in the emotional abuse are now not serving you, right? Those behaviors could be things like being defensive, automatic lying, doing things that are codependent, acting in ways that would have helped you survive in that relationship are no longer actually benefiting you anymore. And so that's what's really important to understand is like, you know what it's like to be in that horrible place of abuse. And then when you get out of there, you know what it's like to be in the swamp where you have all of these things that you're trying to repair, all of these wounds that you're trying to heal and soothe. And then, issues are surfacing and bubbling up, right? It may be fear of the future, lack of trust in other people. You may find that you're doing things like sacrificing yourself for others. And so it's really important to know that like each phase that you're in serves a purpose, right? But if you're no longer in the emotional abuse, you're no longer being actively abused, you could be taking those coping strategies, those trauma adaptations that helped you survive, and because they've been such habitual things, carrying those into parts of your life that are no longer abusive. And so that creates more and more problems for you. So that's why this swamp place feels so bad, because it's almost like, well, hold on, I got out of the emotional abuse. I should be experiencing dry land and I should experiencing rainbows and sunshine, and it just doesn't feel like that. But that's because there's so much leftover junk that has to be released in order for you to be able to pull yourself out of that swamp, right? And as I said before, there may be other people out there who can help you. You may listen to this podcast for support. You may hire a coach or a therapist. You might have friends that want to help you. But ultimately, if you are not able to get unstuck, there's something blocking you on a subconscious level. And I'm going to tell you this straight up, like this stuff is not for the faint of heart. Like this is not something you're just going to immediately think your way out of, or you're immediately going to be able to switch overnight. Some people can do that, right? Some people have the ability to just say, I'm never going to behave like this again, and switch it and turn it off. But for most of us, our brains are wired in such a way that they create habits that create automatics for our survival. And so if you have these kinds of automatic things that are happening because of the abuse, and you're carrying them into the next phase of your life, and you're still feeling like you're in that swamp, there's a really good reason why, and it's because of your brain. So these kinds of things, right, that I mentioned, like no one understands me, and having relationship problems, and fear of losing your identity, and trust issues, all these things that are coming up, these are persisting even after you're no longer in that relationship with that person, even though you're no longer actively being abused. And so what we really want to do is start to change those things so that you can pull yourself out of the swamp. Now, I really want to go through a couple misconceptions about your emotional abuse recovery. And for most people, there is this expectation that recovery will be a lot easier because you're no longer with the person. And for some people, that is true, right? Because it's analogy I like to use is you can't heal your hand if it's sitting on a hot stove, right? So it's the same way if you're in the relationship still. You can't really heal yourself while you're being abused. So when we leave, or escape, we think, okay, well, it's going to be easier. Of course, it is going to be easier because you're not under the constant abuse. However, some people leave, get out, and are still being abused by their abuser, right? Because they're not no contact. The person is creating smear campaigns. Other people, they're getting hit from all different angles, okay? You may be dragged to court, like things like that. So yes, you might not be in that relationship anymore, but there can be leftover things that are, if you're able to go no contact, it's probably going to be a lot easier than if you're not. So this expectation that recovery is going to be quick or it's going to be a lot easier, right? We have to look at these things on a case-by-case basis in each individual person. Plus, each individual person has their own set of tools, has their own set of personality traits, has their own programming, right? So it's not going to be the same for every single person. That's why healing from emotional abuse and trauma is so complex and takes a lot of practice. A lot of times people think it takes time, and time will happen regardless, right? Time goes on no matter what. But really, it's what you do with the time. It's not how much time it's going to take. I hear these things in the healing community. I have in my Facebook group, even I've heard people say, yeah, well, I was married for 20 years, so I'm 50 now and I'm never going to be able to heal because it's going to take me 5 years, for every year that we were married. So I'm just going to give up, basically. But that's just not true, right? These are just these misconceptions, these things that people have been told, oh, well, if you had this much abuse, it's going to take you the same amount of time to heal. And I'm here to tell you that's just not true. I was in my emotionally abusive relationship for 20 years myself. And, before I had the tools, I thought it was going to take that long because in therapy, it was taking me, let's say, 4.5 years, I think, about 4.5 years and I didn't feel like I was actually making much headway at all. But when I learned the source of my emotional unrest and I learned the tools that would help me change my automatic and change my brain, then things started to speed up significantly. Within months, I was starting to feel like a totally different person. So that's why I want to help other people do the same thing, because it doesn't have to take a long time. And that's just a misconception about that. Another thing is that, and this isn't a misconception, but this is just an important note, is that it takes a lot of self-compassion and patience, because if you're judging yourself and you are saying, oh, I should be further along, or making yourself feel bad because you had a setback, or you felt the need to look at their social media, or you wanted to call them, right, or whatever, right? You have to have compassion and grace with yourself, because this isn't something you've ever done before, right? This is something that is a complicated journey. It's not something that anybody should really have to do alone. So be patient with yourself and compassionate. So let's talk a little bit about shifting out of the swamp. There are different things that you can do when you want to shift out of the swamp, and I definitely want to address the thing of people who feel like they're stuck there. But the first thing is to really get used to using your subconscious mind for healing. This is what my specialty is. This is what helped me, and this is what has helped all of my clients. And if you're not familiar with the subconscious mind, or you're just dabbling your toe in and you maybe know a little bit about it, but not really on a deep level, I would really encourage you to start researching. The subconscious mind is basically in charge. It is running 95% of the show. So if you say, I want to heal, and I know that I'm worthy, and I know that I deserve this, That, I'm telling you, is only 5% of what's happening inside your mind. The rest of the stuff, that 95%, is all the programming and all the things that you've been made to believe about yourself throughout your lifetime. So if you were told that you weren't good enough, or if you were made to believe it by someone's actions and how they treated you, if you were never supported, if you were neglected, if you were mistreated, right? All these things are creating a framework for what you believe about yourself, what you believe about the people around you, and what you believe about society at large and the world. So that 95% is going to be the driver. It's going to be what controls how you feel when reality shows up differently from what you believe. And it's going to be what creates your actions or inactions, right? So if you're someone who didn't believe that you were worthy, didn't believe you were good enough, didn't believe you could do it, didn't believe this or that, right? Well, of course you're going to stay right where you are, because that belief system isn't going to motivate you to move forward. And so that's where it's really important to get into your subconscious mind. So how do you do this? Like, how do you get emotionally empowered? What are the techniques? How do you do this? The first thing you want to do is practice mindfulness and self-awareness. The subconscious mind is a very, very complex place. But what most people don't realize is that you can bring up your subconscious beliefs very, very easily. They're pretty much just judgments and statements that begin with the word should or supposed to, need to, can't, won't, right? Things like that. So if you were to be venting to a friend about something and you wrote that down, what you were venting, or maybe you just journal it, you can pretty much go back through there and figure out what your beliefs are. And really, a belief is just any thought that is not 100% true for 100% of people 100% of the time. And that's a lot of things, right? So even though you might believe it, even though you might think it should be this way, or you might think it's supposed to be like that, that doesn't make it true. That doesn't make it a fact, right? Because not everybody thinks that way. So being aware of the things that are going up inside of your mind and the things that you believe is going to be number one. This is going to be the thing that start kicking off understanding what's going on a subconscious level. A lot of times you'll hear about positive affirmations and how you talk to yourself, and these things are all really, really important. But I will tell you, and I can't emphasize this enough, when you hear people say, oh, positive affirmations and think positive, right? That kind of stuff can actually be like toxic positivity. Because what's happening in toxic positivity is you are not validating your true feelings. You're bypassing what you feel with a positive affirmation. And that is just not going to help you. It's not going to help anybody. So if you repeat to yourself, I am good enough, 500 times in the mirror every single day when you wake up, yeah, you might start feeling a little bit better, but it's actually not going to change anything inside of you. Because, and here's the key, you're not speaking the language of the subconscious mind. The subconscious mind does not understand plain old words. It would be just the same if you said, I am good enough in a foreign language and repeated it to yourself day after day and had no idea what it meant. That's the equivalent of how your subconscious mind understands that positive affirmation. The subconscious mind works like a dream. It works seeing stories, images, memories, and things like that play out almost like a movie. And it also incorporates emotion. Emotion is really, really key too. So if you are trying to shift to something more positive, then what you have to do is you have to see the positivity, right? Like use an example from your past. Use, like if you said like, I can't do hard things, if that's a repetitive thing that you find in your mindfulness that keeps coming up, I can't do hard things. I'm not built for difficult situations, things like that, right? Well, you wouldn't just tell yourself that you can, because if you just tell yourself that you can, your brain's never going to get on board. But if you show your brain examples of when you did in the past, at any point in your life, when you're 3 years old, when you're 10, when you're 16, when you're 25, doesn't matter. For anything that you did, that you could do something difficult, then your brain goes, it sees it. It's like, oh, I remember that. Oh yeah, I did do that. oh yeah, I can do hard things, right? That's what actually changes your brain, not just repeating positive affirmations and positive self-talk. Now, it is important to talk to yourself nicely. I don't want to like take that away from anybody, right? If you notice that you say, oh man, you're so stupid, catch yourself in the moment and say, wait a minute, I'm not so stupid, I just made a mistake, right? Or, oh, you're such an idiot, right? Some people do that. They talk to themselves very nasty. And it's important to recognize when you do that and change that, right? Catch it right in the moment. Another thing that can help you with your subconscious mind is just getting into the practice of visualization, practicing things that will help you see with your mind's eye, right? Like, so if you like to meditate, if you can just run scenarios through your mind that are positive scenarios, like a lot of times people, especially when we're healing or in recovery mode, we are visualizing negative things. We are predicting a very scary future, or this is bad thing's going to happen, or that bad thing's going to happen. But changing the narrative, right, is what's going to help you, because your brain actually doesn't know the difference between an imagination and a reality. So if you're telling your brain these horrible scenarios, it thinks it's happening right now. If you're imagining something really bad happening, then your brain actually thinks it's really happening. It doesn't know the difference in real versus imagined. So that's why it's really important to get into the habit of showing your mind positive stories, good endings, instead of bad ones. Okay? This will help you just kind of start retraining your brain. Another thing that a lot of people really struggle with, so I want to address this, is rumination, right? Rumination is one of those things that we do when we are trying to cope with a situation. And then what happens is your brain turns it into an automatic for you. And the problem with this is a lot of times we don't want to be thinking of the things that we're thinking about, but your brain doesn't know that because you've told it by thinking of it so often that it's important. So if you are planning a party let's say a vacation. Let's say you're planning a vacation, you want to go to Hawaii next year, and you are thinking about Hawaii every day. You have a screensaver on your phone, you are researching about it, you're in Facebook groups learning about it, you hired a travel itinerary planner, like you're doing all these things, right? Chances are what's going to happen then is your brain is going to make more of that automatic. So the more you think about Hawaii, the more your brain is going to show you, the more thinking you're going to be doing about it, right? And it's no different when it comes to pain, when it comes to things that are uncomfortable. So if you're thinking about your ex and you're thinking about what they're doing and how their life looks and they must be so happy and like all these things, your brain goes, oh, this is important. I need to put this on autopilot. So I'm going to make this automatic so this person doesn't have to think about it anymore, right? It's just automatic. And then you wonder why you can't stop thinking about it. You wake up thinking about it, you think about it through the day, you think about it when you're going to sleep, and you can't change it. But the thing is, you can change it. You just have to change the thought patterns that are creating it. Okay? All right. Other things that you can do with rumination is really being grounded in the present moment, being in the now. And I have another whole podcast on that, another episode that if you scroll back, you can listen to that. But being present in the moment keeps you out of the past and keeps you out of the future. So rumination is one of those things that we're either thinking about the past a lot, like, oh, how things used to be and like everything was so wonderful when he was so nice, or, you know, they were treating me this way or that way. Or you're ruminating about the future, about what they're doing, about what could be, about what should be happening, that kind of thing. So rumination is where you're either stuck in the past or stuck in the future, but you're not present. So being present and grounding yourself in the now really, really will help with that. Another thing that a lot of times we're struggling with in the swamp is these triggers, right? Getting triggered. And a trigger is really just a trapped memory, right? So it's something that you stored away to help you survive. So if anything triggered you from your relationship that you used as a survival mechanism, and you carry that now beyond the abusive relationship and it happens again, it's going to result in that same fight or flight or freeze, whatever mode response that your body is implementing to keep you safe. So I'll give you an example of one of my triggers was hearing the garage door. So when I was with my abuser, anytime I would hear the garage door, I would run to microwave my husband's food, get everything, make sure it was all set up on the table. I would literally, he would message me when he was on his way home, and I would be timing everything so that his food would be on the table, ready to go as soon as he walked in the door, so he didn't have to wait to eat. And so over time, the garage door opening became this like trigger for me. I didn't realize it back then, but then when I got to be alone and I was no longer in that abusive relationship, and then the garage door opened, that sound from like my boyfriend coming in or my kids opening the garage door from the keypad or whatever it might be, immediately those emotions started to flood back, because that was such a impactful, fear-based thing for me. If I didn't have everything ready, then I was going to get lectured. I was going to get, talked down to. It was going to be an argument, or I was going to be made to feel that I wasn't good enough, or whatever that might be. So maybe you have a situation that you can remember that was like that, where you have a trigger and it was there because at that time it probably helped you survive and cope. But now when you're no longer in that relationship and you're in this swamp trying to heal, you're feeling like the same exact things come up. So identifying what your triggers are can be helpful. And sometimes we don't know, right? So you're not going to always know every single trigger that's going to come up, right? Sometimes they just happen. And that's happened to me before too, where I was just out somewhere and something happened. A song came on in the grocery store and it triggered me. We can't always identify them ahead of time. But what we can do is we can work on ourselves on a deep personal level so that those kinds of things do not trigger us. Because for most people, triggers like that are fear-based, right? So if we can release the fear because of the things that we're believing on a subconscious level, then when those things do come up, we eliminate those triggers, or at least lessen them so that they're not so impactful and lead us down a spiral of a panic attack or something like that. So it's really important to, not, yes, if you can identify certain triggers, that's great, but you're not going to be able to identify all of them. So more importantly, it's figuring out what's creating fear in you, and then we can work through those things to release that for you. Now, another really big important thing that everybody should, in my opinion, work through is self-love. If you are in the swamp, you are in this destitute place, and you feel like you can't get out, and you feel like it's never going to get better, you feel like it's never going to ease up, one of the most important things that you can do for yourself is practice self-love. And some people will say, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to love myself. I used to say the same thing. I literally didn't know. It was like, what are you talking about? I don't even know what self-love is. But I'm here to tell you, if you know how to love others, you can figure out how to love yourself. And self-love isn't just about like self-care. And I need to make a distinction here. A lot of times people think, oh, I'll just go get a massage, or I'll get a pedicure or manicure, or I'll take myself out to dinner. And those things are wonderful, and they are part of self-care. But true, authentic self-love means you are going to do things for yourself because you love yourself so much. You will not sacrifice yourself. You will not betray yourself for others. I'm not talking about making compromises in a relationship. I'm talking about actually betraying yourself, right? You're not going to do that if you love yourself. Just like you wouldn't betray someone else if you loved them, right? You have to treat yourself like you would want to be treated in a relationship, right? So yeah, you can have self-care routines, but you also need to be able to set boundaries, right? What are you willing to tolerate and accept? And have those boundaries ready to go, and be willing to stand firm in those boundaries and follow through. The other thing that you can do is be honorable with your word to yourself. So if you tell yourself, oh, tomorrow I'm going to get out of bed and I'm going to work out, and then you sleep in and you tell yourself some excuse of why you can't do it, you're not being in integrity with yourself. You're not being honorable. You're not honoring your words to yourself. So it's really important to take a look at ways that you are loving to yourself and ways that you could be more loving to yourself. Start identifying these things. Self-love is a big, big piece to healing. When we start in my programs with my clients, we always start here. We always start with self-love, because for most people who've been in an emotionally abusive relationship, that self-worth is either one, never existed, or two, was completely destroyed by the person they were in that relationship with. Okay? So, loving yourself, giving yourself boundaries, sticking to your word, like those kinds of things, right? Those are really good ways that you can start practicing self-love. And again, you can do all the self-care things, but it's going to be more important on an inner level, deeply inside, that you learn to love yourself. And another piece to that is like embracing who you truly are. And some people will say, well, I don't know who I am. That's going to be important too. Figuring out who you are, what you like to do, what are your interests. Is this something you took on from someone else? Or is this something that you really like to do? Trying things out, practicing things, right? Connecting with people who you enjoy being around, allowing yourself to be you without judgment, without judging yourself, and without worrying about what other people think. So let's get into what I said earlier about being stuck in the swamp and knowing you want to get out, but feeling like you just can't. And I'm going to be very sensitive here because I have experienced a lot of emotional abuse myself, and I know how hard this is, and I know how desperate it feels when you cannot make things happen for yourself, when you feel completely alone, when you feel like you are isolated, when you feel like something's wrong with you because you can't move forward. Well, I'm here to tell you there's nothing wrong with you. I promise you that. This is just about your brain and how your brain has been programmed to keep you alive, to help you survive, to keep you feeling safe. Okay? So if you're in the swamp, and let's say you're out of the emotional abusive relationship and you're in this deep, dark place, and it seems like you're never going to be able to get out. You will be able to get out. So have hope there, right? If you're rolling your eyes at me right now, just know I've been there. I know what this is like, and my clients too. And I've pulled them out of the swamp as well. Now, I will say, I didn't just go in and drag people out of the swamp. They had to reach their hand out, and I had to give them the tools, and I had to tell them what to do, right? I didn't just pull them out. I'm there to help you. I'm there to guide you and give you the things that are going to be most effective and impactful on a root level, right? This isn't coping. The work I do is not coping. You're not going to be coping here, okay? That's for the old ways of doing things. Oh, we're just going to cope with the pain. Oh, we're just going to learn how to manage our triggers. Oh, nope, we're not doing that anymore. That's what frustrated me so bad when I was in therapy, because I would ask my therapist, what can I do? What can my homework be? How can I fix this? I wanted to know the exact steps. I wanted to have a plan. And it felt like just going, telling about my problems, venting about the things I was dealing with, having someone to listen to me and explain to me why the things were the way they were, but nothing was changing. Nothing was changing. I was still in the swamp, and I hated it. So, what could be the reason? Let's talk about this for a few minutes. If you are feeling like if you get out of the swamp, that now all of a sudden people are going to expect different things of you. If you heal and you move forward and you rise up and you're doing great, then maybe in your mind you're thinking, well, it must not have been that bad. If I can heal that quickly, if I can get over 20 years of trauma, maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe it wasn't abuse. Maybe they didn't even hurt me that bad. Maybe I was being dramatic. Okay? So just hear me out on this. Your brain is just trying to protect you. And oftentimes, when we are stuck, there's a really good reason for it. And that reason is because it makes us feel safe and protected. So that's why it's really, really important to be honest with yourself and understand, okay, if I get out of the swamp, if I am healed, if I am this person who is shining and is an example to my kids and is just totally healed, and I feel so good about myself. Let's fast forward out to the future. What negative meaning could I have for that? What are people going to think about me? Right? The only reason you would resist leaving the swamp is because there's something negative that would happen. Something on a subconscious level that you would be believing that it means about you, it means about your situation. Now, I'm going to give you a really good example of this. I had struggled with receiving money, okay? So I've been on my healing journey for a long time, and it looks different as it goes along. But I had hired a money manifestation coach to help me. What I didn't know was that I was going to really get deep into my subconscious mind. And as I was talking to her and, struggling with really expanding my business and making all these dreams come true for myself and, getting all these extra clients, all this stuff that I wanted so desperately, right? I wanted to bring in people to support and make money at the same time, okay? And I wanted to make this massive contribution. I still do, right? But at the time when I was dealing with my coach, what came up was victim mentality. And I shudder to even speak these words out loud. I hate actually even saying it. And that's what I told my coach. I said, okay, I'm just going to be really honest here. But I feel like that if I expand and if I have this amazing business and I am helping all these people and I'm doing all this amazing work, then what is that going to mean about my life? It's going to mean that it wasn't that bad. It's going to mean that my ex didn't hurt me. It's going to mean that, oh, well, look how well she's doing. Look how great she's doing. It must not have been that horrible, right? So I'm being very vulnerable here with you and sharing something that happened to me within the last year where I was working on things for myself on a subconscious level. And I didn't know that that was going to come up when it came up. But truly and honestly, these are the kinds of things that happen when you start doing the deep inner work. But the really great news was when I was able to start shifting out of that, when I was able to start saying to myself, wait a second, is this true or is this just a story that I've made up in my head? And I actually know how bad it was. I actually have evidence of my trauma, right? And just because I am doing okay, actually doing better than okay, doing amazing, doesn't take that away, right? So that's what I really want you to think about, is that could there be a reason why you might not want to leave the swamp? And if you're shaking your head, no, I want to get out, I want to get out, I want to get out. I'm here to tell you, on a subconscious level, if you are stuck, there may be a reason that you're in resistance, okay? I say this with so much love and so much compassion. I know how the brain is wired. I know how the brain is working, and I've seen this in client after client after client. And when you get to the source of the resistance and when you move that crap out of the way, then you actually can move yourself out of the swamp. This is the thing that I do. This is how I help people, right? There's not always massive resistance, right? But certain people have that. And I wanted to bring this to your attention because if we are talking about, escaping the swamp of emotional abuse recovery, it has to be addressed that there could be a level of comfort to being there. There could be a level of safety hanging out there, right? Because another thing that I've experienced with other clients is that if they get out, they don't know who they are. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to turn. They don't believe in themselves enough to be able to survive out of where they're at. Some people have felt like if they move out of that swamp, they won't have the support and the compassion and the love from people in their family because it'll be like, oh, well, you're fine. You're good now. Well, you don't need us anymore. So this is why it's so important to really take a look at what could be holding you there. Because there are people with their hand out to help you. There are Facebook groups, there are tools, there are therapists, there are coaches, there are things like this podcast. But ultimately, it has to come from you, has to come from inside of you. And if you're thinking, well, I don't know how to figure this out, I don't know how to get these things out of my subconscious mind, I don't even know what it is, I don't even know where to begin, then what you can do, you can schedule a free 20-minute call with me where I will help you. I will help you uncover a subconscious block in 20 minutes. Literally, it doesn't take that long to figure out what it is. I just need to listen to you talk and then I can tell you what they are. So if you're like, I don't know where to start, you can start there. Now, I'm not going to be able to release those blocks for you in that 20 minutes, but I can help you figure out what it is. And then you can start doing some of that work on your own to figure out how you can start shifting your mindset on those things. And that's going to be really, really important. So I've done this for multiple people on these free chats that I do. I don't get anything from these free chats except for I get to know about you. I get to learn about you. I get to use the things that you're struggling with to help other people. I can create content about it. I can create podcasts. I can write stuff in my book, whatever, right? Like I'm actually getting that, but it's totally free. So if you're struggling and you're like, where do I start? Start with the 20-minute chat. And on the intake form for the 20-minute chat, it asks if you want to uncover a subconscious block, please be as detailed as possible. So if you feel like there's something in the way of you feeling happy, if there's something in the way of you going on a job interview, if there's something in the way of you being able to stand up for yourself, whatever it is, just be detailed in that. And then I can take the time to figure out what could be part of the issue before we get on the call. And then when we get on the call, we'll dive right in and I will help you figure that out. We'll do it on Zoom and I can help you figure out what that is. And then what I always do for everybody is I send an email follow up, say, hey, here's what we uncovered and here's where you can start and here's the things that you can do to start challenging those beliefs and start, pulling yourself out of that swamp. So I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope you will, be able to start to look at these things a little bit differently. And, just as a recap, there's these different misconceptions about healing, and when you leave or escape an emotionally abusive relationship, that it's going to be easy, or that some people think it might even be quick. But the other misconceptions is it's going to take forever. And that's just not true. And there are things that you can do to start getting out of the swamp, right? And start feeling emotionally empowered through mindfulness, through using the language of the subconscious mind, and chuck the positive affirmations, right? We're not doing that unless we're using the proof that our brain needs to see, and use visualization exercises with that. And if we're struggling with rumination, we're trying to get out of the past, out of the future, into the present moment, and then, managing your triggers, right? We're not coping here. We're actually going to get to the root of what they are so that you can prevent them or prevent them from spiraling out of control. And then the last thing was building self-love is so key. So key. I'm sure you've heard this before, but make sure that you understand what that actually is and find ways that you are loving yourself or not loving yourself. If you know ways that you're loving yourself, double down on that. If you know ways that you're not, start bringing that back into the equation there. So if you are interested in doing a 20-minute chat, go down to the show notes here, click the button, and just sign up for a 20-minute chat, and I'll help you uncover a subconscious block to start shifting you out of that swamp. If you're interested in working with me one-on-one in my coaching program, that's different. That's a 30-minute call where I will explain to you how my program works. I will explain to you the details, give you all the information, how it looks, what it is. You can also go to my website and you can read about it there at whentearsleavescars.com. So thanks for tuning in. Be kind to yourself and be on the lookout for more episodes just like this so that I can help you start to make these changes, positive changes in your life to help you heal and recover from your emotional abuse. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll talk to you next week.